Alright, so I just wanted to start reading this next post. Even though I already read that second one today, I won't probably have time tomorrow to read it in the morning. And I don't know, I'm just thinking about what to say and what I've been thinking prior to actually getting into reading it. And a lot of it just has to do with, I know the fact, I know how people are basically, and I know that, like, I've been accused of being rude by basically the way I, blow over either certain comments, like, I mean, because I get messages, even though I have the comments off on most of my videos, there's a few that have comments on, and it's just funny, people will claim that I'm rude while being rude, and it's like, well, I don't know, it's just, if I gave a shit about everything everyone said, I would not have any time to do anything that, I actually want to do. And if I didn't care, or if I was, if I didn't have some sort of concern of trying to do something to help people, or, just out of altruism, I guess, then I wouldn't be doing any of this. And I would just be as careless as most people in my life, and say, oh, I can't do anything, and oh, what's the point, and oh, there's, oh, I don't have time to read a book, or I don't have time to read a blog or watch a video, but then they have all the time, you'll have all the time to do, I don't know, it's just like how people will read something, or in my experience, they'll look at something and only find the problems or the negatives. And while that's important to some degree, at the same time, it's like they just look for excuses. It's that whole false skepticism thing I was talking about, how people will they'll try harder to, not do something than the effort that it would take to actually do it. And it's just, so yeah, like, I know that there's going to be like a lot of, maybe not a lot, but there's going to be some like trolling and annoying fucking bullshit, because this is opening a can of worms. And I've already had people try to, like, they'll play nice at first. They'll be like, oh, they'll give you, they'll try to hook you in and make you interested, and then try to act like your friend, kind of, and then be fun, then just like start. It's just deceptive, and YouTube will say, oh, like, I'm deceptive or whatever just by uploading a private video, when there's all this shit on YouTube, especially the flat Earth bullshit, a lot of, like, you could just say psyops or whatever, or whatever you want to call it, disinformation, misinformation, and people like this whole joke. Like, sure, I find things funny to some extent. I mean, usually what I find truly funny is just the ironies of everyday reality, but and the paradoxes and the oxymorons and the contrasts. But I don't know. And Crowley's a huge figure in all, like, a lot of respects, like, just because he's given all this flack, and I kind of, he brought it on himself, and some of it's justified. But again, like, the fact that some people, like, with what's on YouTube about Crowley, it's like they want to find the negative. They want to, and they even would rather believe a lie, or something that's not even, there's no evidence for, than the fact that, than the truth. And sure, like Crowley wasn't he had some pernicious aspects of his character, but and I'm not going to excuse those, and I'm not going to be an apologist for those aspects of him. But at the same time, again, with the confronting of the shadow and all that, and like Crowley said, my adepts have their heads in the heavens and their feet in the hells. You kind of have to go to certain extents and extremes to truly know for yourself. And so I think he did certain things like to even as a kid with the childish naivety of and that's the problem, I think, with limited knowledge, you end up a lot more destructive and dangerous things can happen individually and collectively without knowing, and having these sort of mythological ideas. And like the idea of Satan is so powerful that some people, including myself as a kid, it's hard to break free from the fear. You're like, oh well, what if there is a hell? Well, and you it's a limiting factor in keeping you even from thinking outside of certain limitations. And it's just really, it all comes back down to motivation and intention and what you want and what you're looking for. And so really just ask yourself that really through all this is what are you looking for, and are you finding it? Where would you look to find it? So this post is called Beginnings. I really always have a problem with starting things myself, like starting a blog post, but once I get started, then it kind of falls into place. But so I'll just start. Unless you have read the work of Kenneth Grant, much of what I say will seem completely alien. Unless you have read the work of Aleister Crowley, Kenneth Grant's work will seem alien as well. To begin, I will give a brief background of Crowley as best I can and move on to Grant later. When initially researching the notorious character Aleister Crowley, many people are turned away by the sensationalism commonly associated with him, or drawn into that negative, aspect of him. Crowley even stated that he liked putting false rumors out about himself so as to turn away would-be readers and researchers, thereby keeping his work truly occult and esoteric. And yeah, I wrote this having no training other than, like basic high school education of typing and writing. So and I didn't really proofread it. I somewhat skimmed it, but I just went as I go, and so there's going to be some errors, and who fucking cares, though? I mean, again, most people probably aren't going to read this. Most people aren't going to watch this video. The few who do, there's probably going to be more people watching this out of anger or spite or butthurt, or looking for anything they can use against me rather than to benefit themselves. And so the few who do, they'll see it for what it is, and or they'll see what they want, and there you go. So get over it. If there's a problem, I have to, so do you. He is perhaps most notably recognized as the most influential Satanist or black magician, although if one looks oops, I think I jumped. Many people have held Crowley in disdain for some of his ideas and behaviors, and concocted stories abound regarding his various magical experiments and adventures. He is perhaps most notably recognized as the most influential Satanist or black magician, although if one looks into his work, it is easy to see that this was not so. And, well, I mean, that again, this whole thing about Crowley, you could say he was a Satanist in a lot of ways. I mean, it depends on your definition of Satanist, because I wouldn't necessarily consider myself a Satanist, but I find the subject of Satanism and like the dark side, the left-hand path, even Satan as a sort of like God form or figure character is really intriguing and has a lot of knowledge, and it is like an initiatory teacher of in itself. Lucifer being the more positive aspect, and Satan being sort of like the more negative aspect. Together being the devil, or the dual one. But so again, I mean, when I think of some of the darker aspects of his work, it's still like, the shadow is still an emanation of God. So, and I think he shows that more so than a lot of teachers, and that's why obviously it takes a while for people to see that, if at all, if they ever do. I mean, but some people can see what Crowley really represented in that way. He put himself on par up there with like Jesus and Muhammad and Buddha, and I would say that he might, he did things in his lifetime that it would be hard to find any other person to have said, I did this, and it's not just the books, it's the traveling, it's the all the experience, and the fact that he wrote it down too, and consciously recognized what he did. Anyway, in fact, his most commonly used nickname was the Great Beast 666. He earned this title from his own mother for being so rebellious and defiant when he was young. When accused of being a black magician, Crowley replied thus: "I have been accused of being a black magician. No more foolish statement was ever made about me. I despise the thing to such an extent that I can hardly believe in the existence of people so debased and idiotic as to practice it. Black magic is not a myth." And I'm not going to be able to recall it right this moment, but he does eventually say in Magic at some point, book 4, that he believed that the Plymouth Brethren sect itself was being so fundamentalistically ignorant. They were a form of like Satanism, and I had thought that myself. It's like being persecuted as like a 12, 13 to 15-year-old by people who claim to be Christian, and I saw this whole like scapegoat sort of witch trial, inquisition-y thing from a very young age. I had my own experiences, and I think that that's a common trait or experience, and so I could see the hypocrisy and the fact that these people who claimed to be godly or Christian were really more satanic than I was, or ever would have been, or would want to be, even though I was the one reading the Satanic Bible, and I was the one reading, listening to Marilyn Manson, and just the typical cliche, what most kids or other people who I knew who would listen to like things like Marilyn Manson, they didn't really see beyond the aesthetic or the external, and they didn't have the motivation or the intention to learn as much as I did. And so Crowley and Marilyn Manson, for me was the introduction to Crowley in particular, and I owe a lot to that Nacht Cabaret website, which explores like the symbolism of Marilyn Manson's art and music and videography and whatnot, and that slowly led me into a lot of this. And there's the similarity between them is the fact that there's this external veil that if you can get beyond, you can learn a lot, but not only learn a lot about them, but yourself, and how, so the whole thing about the black, it's the whole checkerboard symbolism, when you realize the yin and yang, the yin is in the yang and the yang is in the yin, and everything goes, like there's a positive and a negative to everything, including the positive and the negative. So I've been accused of being negative by tons of people. It's simply because when you go into some of these subjects, or when you face like certain frequencies of thought, anger, and even the lower, like that's a more like high frequency, I would say, emotion or range of thought. And some of those ranges of thought are naturally, they're uncomfortable to people, and people like to gravitate to what's comfortable, and they like to, so they like their comfort zones. And it can be, any of this sort of thing can be traumatic to people like who are, used to being comforted or whatever. So, and so I don't want to like force any of this on anyone. And that's why I say, if you don't like it, if you disagree with it, then great. Everyone has a different perspective, and so. It is usually after many years of research into a variety of subjects dealing with philosophy, religion, mythology, etc., that someone encounters Crowley and is able to understand the context of his work. If one can see beyond their apprehensions and misconceptions of the study of magic and mysticism, then one of the biggest steps toward attainment will have been taken. Alright. Oh my god, my cat. Kansu! Kansu! He goes to the bathroom where he knows it's the loudest. Oh my god. In my opinion, one of Crowley's greatest achievements lay in the magical order he created with the help of George Cecil Jones in 1907, called the AA, or Argentium Astrum, Latin, or Astron Argon, Greek. Argentium Astrum, or Astron Argon, means the silver star. It is an initiatory system consisting of 11 grades which correspond to the 10 Sephiroth in the Abyss, that equates the top 3 Sephiroth, called the Supernal Triad, I don't know why. It is an initiatory system consisting of 11 grades which correspond to the 10 Sephiroth in the Abyss, that separates the top 3 Sephiroth, called the Supernal Triad, from the other 7. I gotta edit that. It's been like that for years, apparently, and I didn't even know it. Each grade is intended to bring the initiate to a higher state of wisdom and understanding as they accomplish various tasks according to the grade he or she is in. The AA is loosely based off the initiatory system of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, though it centralizes around a particular holy text that Crowley received from a preternatural intelligence, which later proved itself to be of cosmic importance. This text is known as the Book of the Law, or technically as Liber Tzaddi Subfigura 220, as delivered by 418 or 418 to 93. I believe that's 93. No, maybe it's not. It's probably 666. Yeah, it's 666. I don't know why I thought 93. The main task the initiate must strive for in order to discover... Oh, wait. This picture is probably one of my favorite of Crowley's, and I have it in a frame because I have a bunch of Crowley's in a frame. I just wanted them everywhere. The main task the initiate must strive for in order to discover and actively live their true will is the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel and the crossing of the Abyss. It's basically Tiferet and Doth. I will leave this particular area open for personal study for now and come back to it later. The Book of the Law, which Crowley received in Cairo, Egypt in April of 1904 over the course of 3 days, a chapter a day on April 8th, 9th, and 10th, was dictated to him while he was in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. And see, this is the impression that I had gotten by this point. But apparently he was actually in his hotel when he actually received it. But from a lot of renditions of the story, they make it seem like it's in the Great Pyramid itself. By a voice who identified itself as Iwas, the minister of Horpar Krat. That's basically Harpocrates. It was It was a response to various invocations he performed to impress his then-wife, Rose Edith Kelly, who had little knowledge, let alone belief in the supernatural. On March 18th, after invoking the Egyptian messenger god Thoth, Rose mentioned to Crowley that Horus was waiting for him. Crowley questioned her in regard to her knowledge of Horus, and she answered quite accurately for never having studied mythology or Egyptology. Crowley was convinced she was receiving the information as a result of his invocation. As further proof of her identification of Horus, Rose was inspired to find a particular stela or stone tablet, which Crowley and her indeed ended up finding in the Bulak Museum. The inventory number assigned to it happened to be 666, the number Crowley had identified himself with since a child, further clarifying the ordeal. Afterwards, the stela was realized to give attribute to the three central characters of Liber AL, Nuit, Hadit, and Rahur Kuit. Nuit, Hadit, Rahur Kuit. And that would be Ankaf Nakansu. And there's the number up. This is a best fucking version of the original I can get, and it's not very good quality. For years, Crowley doubted the legitimacy of the text, or I could probably get a better one if I took a picture from book 4, but that'll take too much time right now. For years, Crowley doubted the legitimacy of the text and failed to understand its message. He struggled with some of the verses and actually found certain bits quite abhorrent. Over the years, Crowley realized its importance of the importance of the text in relation to the traditions of Eld and their direction into the future. To him, it signified the inauguration of a new era for humanity, that of the eon of Horus the Child. The philosophical system surrounding Liber AL ended up being called Thelema, which is the Greek word for will. One of the primary tenets of Thelema is the 11-fold axiom, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." This is commonly misunderstood to mean do whatever you want, but it really means to find your true will and do it, which is often quite contrary to what you want to do. Much study and rigorous work is required if one really wishes to reach enlightenment, and it can only come with exercise. Another phrase often following the latter is "love is the law, love under will." This means that love, Greek agape, is the means to the law's fulfillment. And people get, again, like upset for some reason when you mention enlightenment or illumination because it implies something external, or you would think it implies something external or some grandiose thing, but it's really not. It's really just it's clarity, and so it's really nothing. And that's kind of the whole key to this whole thing. But the Book of the Law is intended to be interpreted by each individual in regard to his own great work and path to enlightenment. My own initiation has led me to unlock for myself certain pieces of what was at first an incomprehensible jungle, but only after much work and discipline was I able to better comprehend the concepts and information. I learned about Crowley first in various books on the general topic of magic and metaphysics, such as, the Donald Tyson books and what else. Pretty much that was it. That was the first and only books. 2 books, Ritual Magic, it's Purpose and Practice, or whatever it is, by Donald Tyson, and New Millennium Magic. And began studying him as a part of an English class biography assignment in my senior year. Yeah, I did that in high school. I wish I still had it, but I don't. I had read a little about him when studying another interesting cultural persona, Marilyn Manson, since I was about 13, though it wasn't until my later high school years that I was able to see his relevance. I, too, had a defiant predisposition when I was younger and found much to relate with in both of them. I grew up in a constricting environment in East Texas, which I'm now thankful for since it prepared me for what I am now writing about. And that's basically what I was talking about with, so-called Christians and... Nothing short of monumental, Crowley's work consists of a wide variety of texts, ranging from bizarre poetry to mystical texts of all sorts. He embodied a specialized form of knowledge which he claimed was a rediscovery of the Sumerian tradition, which is to say, he sought to find the roots of magic which span back to the origins of recorded civilization in ancient Sumeria. It has little to do with the late distortions commonly known as New Age, other than the fact that much of that material is based on work we can thank Crowley for. Crowley's intention was to fuse the teachings of the Eastern mystics with the Western mystery traditions, both of which were lacking what the other had. Much like the case between science and religion, another set of institutions he sought to integrate for the benefit of the underlying aim of both. He came to term this fusion scientific illuminism, which, from the uninitiated perspective, has been perverted as the unified religion or New World religion, the universal religion, supposed to merge all religions under a common brand based on their underlying similarities. Which, in a sense, yeah, that's kind of what's been happening and whatnot. But this whole idea of the Theosophical Society and Lucius Trust and being this like satanic New World Order thing, I think that's a mischaracterization of those, at least those orders, because I don't think that was their intention. It may be the intention of some people, but if you read their writings, I don't think that was Alice Bailey and Blavatsky and Crowley's intention. I think that they appreciated the differences, but yet saw the underlying similarities. They didn't want to, have everyone wear a uniform and call themselves Satanists or something or whatever. Crowley just meant that rather than accepting myths and legends as true, one should work to test their hypothesis and base their beliefs of experience rather than faith based on fear and cultural upbringing. And back to like Liber Astarte or whatever, where he says to like invoke a god and then basically deny its existence and try to see how it works, how both processes work. Just as an experiment, because with the whole scientific illuminism thing, how many scientific so-called skeptics apply religious or spiritual practices in a scientific method or manner to see if they even work or have a validity? Because this whole thing is a long process, the whole grades and initiation and all that. It's going to take you time. You're not going to read a book, do a spell, and expect it to work. And if you, it's not like that. It really is a test. But Crowley was so opposed to fascism and authoritarianism, it becomes quite a contradiction when people say he was for a one-world religion or government. And I don't know. At some point, you can only get you can be as against fascism and authoritarianism as you want, but sometimes you're more effective alive than dead. So sometimes you do have to go with the program in a way to it's like how a lot of people, including myself, hate the way Google operates and Facebook and all these other things, yet we rationalize to ourselves that, well, we use them to use them against themselves or use them for the better, despite the problems. And so same with, Marilyn Manson, for example. He doesn't seem to... Lately, he seemed to be more anti-establishment. So, whereas lately he's more tied up in with them. If you have paid attention at all to his career, and I think that I get the sense that he kind of sees that too. I've just watched him. I've learned a lot through him, and the way in which he's, toned things down a bit. I can see why, because I myself, the more against the grain you go, sometimes it's got its purpose, but sometimes it's purposeless, and it's just you're wasting your time and energy. And sometimes you just got to it's like Dion Fortune, I believe, said, rather than even give any mind to evil or negativity or whatever, let it burn itself out. So, because it probably will, but unfortunately, with the fall and all that, and everything being upside down and backwards, you would think that, like, logic tells you that, but really, I don't know. Sometimes I don't know if the world doesn't appear to actually be governed by logic, and that's really what the fall is all about. Or at least there's a schism between logic and reality. What should be and what is. Whether Crowley's work can be considered of value is for each person to decide for themselves. One thing is certain: if it wasn't for Crowley, life as we know it might be very, very different. The 60s counterculture movement may have never even come about if Leary and company hadn't been inspired by the legacy of his penchant for exotic intoxicants, themselves compelled to experiment with the powerful mind-altering substances like LSD, psilocybin, mescaline, DMT, etc., as an entheogenic or consciousness-expanding tool. That's a brash statement looking back. Leary did really, he claimed he was influenced by Crowley and thought he was carrying on his work. And when you look at all the pop culture, I mean, not like pop culture references altered history or anything, but it's not even just the pop culture references, but Crowley really, if you read a lot of authors and a lot of prominent people, he did influence them. Much like Crowley, the general counterculture movement and its figureheads ended up being misunderstood and demonized by those who misperceived their original intention. But because of the many people ingesting psychedelics and psychedelic culture at the time were so used to mass market idealism and addicted to capitalistic materialism, the operation went sour and left a bad impression. And yeah, that's pretty much the problem with the whole 60s thing is, originally, I think the intention may have been good, but in the setting, the whole set and setting was not good. So rather than achieve liberation and peace, I think in the end, egos were just inflated on a whole different level. Probably fractured a little bit too. The religious, spiritual, mystical experience is very similar to a psychedelic experience in that the ego is transcended or altered, you could say altered, and spirit and matter are shown, often in beautiful visionary displays, to be universally interlocked as different expressions of the same divine source. Or it's just all reflections, infinitely greater than the mind can grasp from the mundane levels of awareness. The transference of awareness to zones beyond the ego is basically a form of crossing the abyss, though it is first necessary to establish balance at the center level, Tifreth, the Anahata chakra, or heart chakra. Otherwise, there is danger of obsession, imbalance, mania, or even death. That's kind of a brash statement too. You're not going to just die. Some people do, I guess, die from psychedelic experience. Psychedelic. I don't know about spiritual experiences though. If you were to, they claim that you're not going to reach Kether until you would have to die, and I'd say there's some truth to that, though. I think you can intuit Kether and Ain and Ein Sof and Ein Sof 4. It's not that hard. Anyone who says otherwise just hasn't understood. Just does. There's no a lot of anything above the abyss. Really, is you're not going to be able to really communicate in speech anyway. So it's becomes pointless at that point. The situation facing humanity today is our lack of interest in and focus on the spiritual, non-physical world. And again, I disagree with that statement looking back, because like I was saying in the last thing, it's all about really the physical world. But again, it's just, that's coming from a more balanced, integrated outlook on it. Most people in the material world, like Muggle type consciousness, you could call it, where there's no magic and it's all just plain matter, which, I shouldn't. Basically, the whole materialist outlook is very, it's got its value and to some degree and survival instinct and whatnot, but it's very selfish in a sense, but also just denigrating, and you're really not exploring your mind and the world, in my experience with those sort of people. But materialism has almost completely engrossed modern society, and the only thing that may shock it back into awareness might be a dramatic event caused either by weather or an accident on our part. You could say that, and since writing this, there's been tons of fucking shit, and people just go right back to their their lives. So again, it's like people want to be in their comfort zone. They don't want to be shown negatives. Like after a school shooting, they want a law to feel good about themselves so they can feel it'll never happen again. They don't want to realize, like, the more blinders you put on yourself, just the blinder you get. I mean, that's just an example I was thinking about. But I mean, yeah, truth hurts, they say. Unfortunately, the shock we are facing may be more than what our incarnate bodies can withstand. Whatever the future holds for this planet, one thing is certain. This race that assumes it is dominant must quickly mature and gain a level of competence sufficient enough to deal with the forces of nuclear annihilation it is in possession of, or else succumb to the fate of civilizations before ours. The only way that we can do this is for as many people to raise their level of wisdom and love for the world by learning to see the spirit within and beyond our material reality. And this is just like me at the time calling for peace, basically, like, because we're gonna fucking destroy ourselves at the rate. I mean, I was told this as a kid by my teacher that, oh, World War III, we're gonna destroy ourselves, and it's like everyone knows that if we don't change things, it will. And Alex Gray, I really liked this picture, and I thought it was telling. And he even talks about how it, in one of the documentaries or whatever, and see, it's trying to load. But the universe's man is normally binary. This is to say, it is not uni or one. The macrocosm seems different, unconnected from the microcosm, until man engages himself in initiation, which incrementally dissolves the perceived boundaries between man and his environment, slowly revealing his infinite connection with all being. It is this process that organized religion is failing to impart to its adherents, and science not recognizing as relevant to the equation. Basically, it is the quantum observer effect, like the consciousness is really the primary factor in any philosophic or existential inquiry, and until this is realized and sufficiently tended to, all attempts toward improvement will be sterile. So again, it's like when they tell you in AA or, oh, your bad thinking is, you need to do away with that thinking because you're not thinking clearly. And until then, like, your things won't change. And so a lot of people with bias and conditioning and brainwashing and whatever, they don't think clearly. And religion really does, again, back to the Satan thing, Satan has such a hold on so many people's minds that Christians end up, as much as I appreciate certain aspects of Christianity and the teachings of Jesus, Christians tend to externalize satanic thought forms more so than anyone else, because it's basically such a big element of their thought forms, so, and their thinking structure. It can be very dangerous. So the world doesn't need a new religion, nor does it need any new inventions to survive its imminent apocalypse. It needs to slow down and look back at its long and incredible history so that it doesn't fall into the same holes it has before. No matter what piece of technology we have, if we don't know how to use it or what good it is for, it is useless. When the distance between our technological capacity and our spiritual maturity get far enough apart, there may be no turning back. Therefore, knowledge, along with the balance of wisdom and understanding, are the keys to our survival, or at the very least, a deeper appreciation of this miracle called life. Fortunately, we aren't left to start in the dirt. Many heroic people like Crowley have come before us and made clear the paths that worked for them. We aren't alone with nothing to hold on to, and it is not impossible to change things before it is indeed too late. And see, Crowley, even in his time, could have been killed for what he said and did. And it's not that far out of the realm of possibility that we would revert to a state of such a primitive sort of, state of civilization. I mean, the UK right now is already falling apart. While it is up to everybody to help their fellow men in rising to his or her highest nature, we must teach by example that the only way to achieve such a goal is to keep learning, growing, and improving. There can be no giving in to dependency or feeding off of others' weakness. We need to show the older generation that it is not too late, because I have so many older friends that's their mentality, and they end up going downhill very quickly. And the youth, that it is not too early, and that's, a lot of young people think, they have all the time in the world, but they don't. To begin looking into the mysteries of life, we need to understand that no one is going to tell us things that might end up empowering us, because that will end their dominion over our consensus reality. And again, that's why I'm kind of reading this, because I know no one else is going to, and in a way, I'm doing this out of the kindness of my heart, but also out of the malice towards so many fucking things, and it just puts a smile on my face. So, if we can work to empower ourselves with the strength that comes along with the ascendancy over our primal instincts and drives, then we could turn what is moving towards a dark age into one of love and light in just a couple of generations. The decisions we make now will affect our futures to a great degree, so careful consideration must be taken when planning what we wish to achieve. It's all about planting seeds. At the rate we are moving, if we are to survive our space age and our atomic age, it is nearly impossible to say what type of world we will be living in. What is important now are the values and qualities we instill in our children, who really are the fruit of the world. By their fruits ye shall know them. Matthew 7:16. And ain't that the truth? But familiarization with Crowley's work will be assumed of the readers in my later post, though I will give brief elaborations when needed. I must say that I've had no experience writing until I started this blog, so my skills are not the best. Obviously, I don't have no experience. I wrote some essays in high school. But, and like I said in the other video, what was it? I didn't know anything that I was later going to write, but yet I knew some of the things, obviously. I knew, but it was slowly emerging. So I must say that I've had no experience in writing this blog. My skills are not the best, and there are going to be some inevitable errors. I will try to fix these in time, which I guess now's the time, 6 years later. So if anyone has any comments or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment or send me a message. And yeah, I turned the comments off. Now they're on in the YouTube video. It's probably going to be, who knows what it's going to be. I'm not going to pay attention to anything that's a waste of time. Clearly, I only have so much time. Let's put it that way.